Um, this is terrific. Jim, I've made you co-host, and it's nice to have everybody here tonight. And it's 7 o'clock, so we can get started. I hope everybody had a nice holiday, and it's really great to be back. And I'm excited that we really are starting the year running with a lot of stuff. And this agenda is a really good indication of all that. So let's do a quick roll call. Kevin York,
Here.
Matt Lowry,
Here.
Bill Spalding,
Here.
Jim Hogan,
Here.
and Theo Knoll, myself. I'm here, so that's terrific. Thank you, Susan, and thank you, Aaron, for joining us. Approval of the minutes is our second item. The
Motion to approve the minutes as
That's great.
submitted from the December 12th, 2023 meeting.
Great.
Second.
Thank you, Jim.
I mean, I can say it until I meeting.
All right. All in favor? Kevin?
I'll abstain since I wasn't there.
Yeah, thank you. Matt?
Yes.
All right. Bill?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Terrific. Our third item is to get an update from Kevin about the Wakefield Bylaw Review Committee and where that stands. And
I sent an email earlier this afternoon that kind of gives the latest updates. So Attorney Bobrowski just sent us his first draft of the zoning bylaw. We won't meet as a committee until January 29th to discuss it. After that, then we're going to run it by Planning Board and ZBA for input, thoughts, feedback. But I wanted to send it to everybody so you have a little more time to look at it and just kind of consume it until then. This initial draft was based mostly just on his expertise from having written these for different cities and towns throughout the state and some of the basic initial feedback he had received from the BRC.
Yeah, okay. Do you have a general sense of timing or how we might run through it? Like,
as far as reviewing the one, it's an entirety.
Yeah.
No, I'm not exactly sure how he wants to do that. If he just wants to get feedback from the different groups sort of comprehensively and look at putting it together, or if he wants to actually discuss it with the groups. He hasn't really given a plan of attack for that.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Any other questions or comments from board members? No? Okay. Well, I appreciate Kevin, you staying on top of it and sending it around, and the homework is welcome. So that's great. All right. I think our biggest and meatiest discussion item tonight is the MBTA 3 communities overlay. So that's our fourth item. So I'm going to turn this over to Jim and Aaron and Matt for sure. We received a lot of feedback from the public question and answer forums, and I appreciate that the working groups made a final recommendation. And so I think we're looking to hear that status, the timeline, and any other discussion points where we get to. And I do think we're anticipating reviewing and making a recommendation for town meeting tonight. So let's.
Yep, I can step in, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, I just want to clarify, it's not for town meeting, it's just for the town council.
Town council, that's right. That's what I meant. Thank you.
Yep. So thank you, Mr. Chair. So for those who may be listening afterwards, just some very high level background. A couple of years back, the state passed a law requiring that by the end of 2024, Wakefield and other communities that are serviced by the MBTA pass a multifamily zoning district where multifamily is allowed as of right. Wakefield convened a working group members of the town council, planning board, zoning board of appeals, environmental sustainability committee, as well as a citizen representative to create a recommended map to comply with this state law. The working group has completed its work after the coming up with a proposed map, having through this body 3 public forums where we solicited feedback. We received feedback from 30 different participants over the 3 public forums. So I want to thank everyone who took the time to provide the feedback. The working group took that feedback, reviewed a number of alternative maps, which I'll present to this group, and ultimately came to the decision that we were going to recommend the map that was originally developed. On the base, and I can, in a little bit after I go through the alternatives, I can let Matt explain his line of thinking, because I think he did a really good job of articulating it and the wider working group's theories. So if you bear with me for a second, I'll share my screen. So for those who can see it, so this is the map that the working group is formally recommending to be included in the warrant. From a process perspective, the working group is not going to be the sponsor of the zoning bylaw. There's been the direction has been received to have the planning board be the sponsor, on the basis that the planning board is the body that typically is the manages zoning changes. So on that basis, the working group has this map you're seeing on it that we're recommending. The planning board can elect to make a change to this map, either adding or subtracting, in order to provide for the warrant. I would note that the intent is to have, if possible, if consensus on this group, to submit something to the town council for the January 22nd meeting, in order to allow the town council to refer the matter back to the planning board for the purposes of holding 2 formal public hearings prior to being referred back to the warrant. So in addition to this map, the working group also worked on a bylaw, which I'll defer to Aaron at a later time to review. We got some late breaking feedback from engineering in terms of some of the comments that they recommended we bake into it. So with all that being said, as table stakes, the map that you're seeing on here, it consists of around our downtown business district, as well as the area that surrounds the Wakefield commuter rail station. You'll see that there's a handful of carve outs as it relates to the lots that front North Ave, Albion, and Main Street. The thought process being that we want to keep our commercial streets commercial, and by having those lots excluded, it would make it so commercial facing properties wouldn't be redeveloped into a multifamily 4-unit as of right. The thought process, the working group to the planning board, is that this district really focuses future development that would come from this zoning mechanism in our downtown area, adjacent to our downtown businesses that are line Main Street. It takes advantage of our existing commuter rail access, which we have to do as part of the state law, but it also thoughtfully takes advantage of the fact that we have one of the better bus lines in town along Main Street, and it really centers around that area to try to build up a little more density and foot traffic. As a reminder, we're going from a zone that's primarily zoned as of today, where you can have a lot of two-family buildings as of right, up to 4. We thought that that was based on some of the density requirements from the zoning law, that was a better way to comply than having a smaller zone where you can have significantly more density. This is a little bit more than the absolute bare minimum that you can do for compliance with the state law. However, the working group advocates that for this solution, because while there are problems with the state law and the way it's written, this represents what we think is actually thoughtful and quality zoning piece that actually helps facilitate growth in a weird place and in a manner that we think is appropriate for the town, and helps actually direct development that we think is beneficial for the community as a whole. So those are some of the main basic arguments. I'll walk through a couple of the maps that we were asked to look alternatively, and kind of walk through some of the reasons why the working group didn't go through it, and then solicit feedback from the balance of the planning board. So some of the other maps we looked at maps where we would eliminate sections of the map that you saw the proposed map on the west end, and potentially some additional zones on the eastern half. We thought that didn't make a lot of sense, because the lots that front the streets on the boundary didn't seem like if you removed them, it really fit consistently with having the entirety of the street be zoned for the same thing. Additionally, we looked at other maps where we would lose some of the northwest corner of the west end. We looked at other maps where we lose even a bigger chunk of the west end. Most of these maps were compliant with the state. This one, I believe in particular, was not. You ended up being below the threshold as it relates to the number of units. In addition, separately, based on some feedback in terms of the geographic areas that we were looking at, we looked at these sections down Greenwood. We had originally, earlier in the process, looked at a zone along Greenwood that could have complied by itself. We found that the lots directly adjacent to Greenwood and on the western half of the train tracks where we initially focused our efforts, the lots were too big, so you had to have 5 or 6 units as a right. We thought was inconsistent with the neighborhood character. One of the town councilors pointed out there was a section where there's a significantly higher density of lots, specifically just south of Oak Street, I believe, and they could have theoretically fit. However, if you look at what exists there today, there are almost exclusively single-family homes, whereas the zone that we're proposing to do it has a lot of multifamilies in it as right at this time. So we felt going from almost exclusively like 90% single-family homes, 90 plus, to 4 units as of right might not be the best choice when we could have a zone that already has a blend of single family, 2 families, and even some 4 families, and have that go up to 4. I think the working group would advocate, and as a separate effort, potentially look at this zoning Greenwood, maybe upzone it, to 2 or 3 families as of right, instead of going all the way up to 4. And additionally, we also looked at another map where we would have basically done the same thing in Greenwood, but then shave down even farther the zone up where we're having the primary compliance. There was some back and forth in terms of what could comply or would not comply with adding the Greenwood, because you have to have a certain 50% or more be continuous in terms of the zone that's actually going to be utilized to comply with the state law. So I'd like to just pause, in terms of just the maps. I'll pull up the map that we're actually proposing. Is there any questions, concerns, or comments from other members of the planning board as it relates to the map that we're proposing be included in the warrant?
Can I just note something? So I'm working with Katie Lafferty in our GIS. I've actually have an updated map that has the correct title, as well as some of the language that's removed in the corner, which I don't know if you can see here. I just don't want to get kind of bogged down on that. I'm more than happy to share what the language I have on that, but just wanted to note that as well.
So not seeing any
Oh,
any
Theo
questions.
just.
Oh,
basically-
go for it.
I have a quick question. So when you were playing with the maps, like, was it a 1-to-1 with Greenwood? Because I know, like, it doesn't sound like it necessarily would be, and I think we're also still concerned about remaining consistent with character and not going higher. So I think, right, when you reduce the area, you have to have higher density and higher buildings, right?
That's correct. The big thing with Greenwood that in the original district we looked at was that the way the state law is written, you have to take lots as they currently exist today. And the lots in the section of Greenwood we originally looked at were significantly larger than the existing lots around Wakefield Junction. And that's why you had to go to 5 or 6 units as of right to get to the minimum density thresholds that's established by the state. Again, with the way that the state law is written, there's a number of things that are a balancing act that you have to make sure that if you add or subtract something in one section in terms of the land area, you don't impact your density. And we felt as if it comes down to somewhat of a math experiment, and we thought that adding Greenwood would complicate it more than it actually provided a benefit. Whereas we could go back, we have this zone that we think makes a lot of sense on the merits, regardless of the state law. And then we could go back and potentially upzone Greenwood at a later time if we thought that made sense for the town without all these additional constraints.
Yeah, and
Can I
that-
chime in
yeah,
too?
please.
So yeah, going back to what Jim was saying, so I've been the one really plugging the compliance numbers along after we didn't have the consultant anymore. And I think something else to note too that gets lost in some of this too is you have to have one district that is 50% contiguous. So here you see in this district, we keep calling it a 5 district, but it's technically 4. You see over North Ave, there's those parcels there that connect, so that technically counts as one district. When looking at Greenwood and we made some of the districts smaller, I think this only pertained to one model. It made the 50% contiguous actually not work. And you can play around with different districts to make it work, but that was something also to note. Also, when we originally looked at Greenwood, we looked at kind of the Myrtle Ave area, and those lots were a little bigger. There's area that you could not include due to Crystal Lake in that area there. When we looked at these districts that Jim showed in 4 and 5, it does meet the numbers still doing the 4 family. But given some other data that we pulled together and trying to do better planning for the community as whole, what Jim was alluding to is that neighborhood is mainly, single family, and we have a graph to show that as well. And so I think just, the growth and not growth isn't the word, the already current uses that you see in these districts here kind of stay in line with what we're proposing as part of this MBTA community. On top of all the other things that we lay out as well.
And so I mentioned that we got a lot of feedback from the public, just a quick synopsis of what I think all the members of the planning board were here, but we heard a lot of concerns related to traffic, 40B. We heard a lot of concerns related to, for lack of a better term, trying to resist the state law, do the absolute bare minimum. When we looked at this district, we felt as the working group that this district represented good, solid planning, regardless of if there was a state law or not. We felt as if that the impacts were going to be modest enough from a traffic perspective that the benefits you'd get from having an increased density around our downtown area would more than offset those. And I think that we thought that this was an opportunity to potentially provide an ability for taking even a farther step back. We have a regional housing crisis. We need to deliver more housing as a Commonwealth. This is a small thing that Wakefield can do to help be part of that solution. And we felt as if it made a lot of sense based on the fact that a lot of multifamily zoning or multifamily homes exist in the zone already today, and that you're going from 2 allowable up to 4. So we felt as if it made this, even if there wasn't a state requirement, we felt this zone made sense. I think that's one of the main things I want people to take away from this conversation is that, I think that there are multiple people in the working group that would be advocating for this regardless of whether or not the state was imposing this. As it relates to, traffic, one of the things we did do is we go to the traffic advisory committee. There was some thought at one point of, we have 1.5 as the minimum number of parking spaces per unit. There's a thought maybe going down because you're supposed to be setting this housing near transit. We heard very loud and clearly from the traffic advisory committee that they didn't agree with that. So we ended up maintaining the 1.5 spaces per parking that we had talked originally. Now, Matt, I know you as a member of the working group, do you want to chime in with what your thoughts are and our rationale in maintaining this proposed map?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. You did a great job recapping it. I guess we could have a lot of merits and arguments on whether this is a burden or an opportunity. One of the big things one of my big takeaways is that the state is basically mandating that you give homeowners and landowners more rights. And you often don't hear people complain that, when they have more rights to do things with what they own, that it's a bad thing. But in this case, that's what we're hearing, is that we're being forced, the town's being forced to give people their rights back to develop their land in, by right. So I look at this as an opportunity for downtown. Unfortunately, the zone that the law would like us to focus on would be centered right around Wakefield Station, which basically pulls any density away from downtown, which is not what we want. We did hear a lot of people talk about parking issues and they want as small as possible, but we also heard from quite a few people that actually want to be able to live in a community where they can commute back and forth, not necessarily have a car. I have a child who's of that age and most of their friends really don't want to have vehicles. They do want to have housing. They do want to be able to get around. They do a lot more car sharing. They actually take the T's. So centering this in an area where if people were living there and they could go out and actually get the items that they need, they could go to stores. We have Shaw's, we have farmland. You can live downtown and be self-sufficient. Basically, you could live there and not have to go anywhere without a car. I know people that do it now. So centering this on our downtown just makes sense. It complies with the law. It complies with the spirit of the law of giving housing where people can actually live and sustain themselves. So I was really against putting this in Greenwood where it was proposed, because Greenwood is not self-sufficient. If you need anything, you need to get in a car and you need to drive somewhere. So we're kind of defeating the purpose of making this based on commuters, because putting this district a few blocks away from Main Street would just force people to have more cars and drive more and create more traffic. So having it downtown gives us the best opportunity to revitalize downtown. And again, there's a lot of people that say this isn't going to do it, but they say that about everything. And it just gives us an opportunity to put some housing where we need it, to have people go downtown and not have to drive because they're already there. So this is why I really pushed hard for this. I'd like to say that I'm a little offended that people want us to do the bare minimum. We get that a lot in Wakefield. Just do what needs to be done and don't worry about it. We've done that with everything. We've done that with parking downtown. The town has never acquired any additional parking lots like other towns have. And we just hope that something's going to come in and fix it and we don't have to do anything. Unfortunately, now we're stuck in that position. So the better way to do that is to put people downtown and have them be able to walk to a store and get something. So that's why I'm pushing for this. I don't want to go the bare minimum. The bare minimum would shrink this zone down and pull it again towards Wakefield Station, which again, I don't think is the best for the town. So that's why we stuck with this. And we also got to the point where if we bring this to town meeting and it gets voted down because we've done too much, so be it. The townsfolk will have spoken, and we perhaps will have to try again in the fall or not. So this is why we have this zone and why I'm going to support it. I don't think I could get at the town meeting and support a zone that was a minimum and say that we worked for months. We listened to the town folks and we did the bare minimum. I couldn't really get up and support that. So this is why we have this map, and I hope, as everyone looks at it, you see that the group put a lot of thought into this and worked hard at it. And I think it's a good map. I think it's a good zone. Again, I don't think it's a burden that's being posed on the town. It's an opportunity, and we should look at it that way.
Yeah, thank you, Matt, for that. So, again, I'd welcome, if any other members of the planning board have any other questions or concerns or comments, more than happy to try to address them. And then if not, then I'll pivot to the bylaw.
Yeah, I'd like to share a little bit, Jim and crew. Yeah, Happy New Year. A lot going on in the kitchen, so I've been on mute a lot, but listening in. Yeah, I'm so impressed. I really am. And I've had a chance to look at what some other towns have done. And I've listened to some coworkers that are on boards in other towns and cities and what they've been going through. So honestly, I appreciate the town and the comments and the amount of people we had. I don't know if anybody, if Theo, if we kept track of how many people actually attended these meetings, but that might be another cool thing to add, Jim or Erin. We had this many people show up at the hearings, and each evening, maybe out of the 3, we can show that we had, 88 people show up at the hearings. I think that would be a good thing to add. And to reiterate some of Matt's comments, I know when working, when some of the first things that I worked on in the planning board of about 9 or 10 years ago was the overlay district for mixed use, and we're looking at it. It was amazing to understand and get into the details of exactly how the housing was laid out and how difficult it was for walking to downtown and connecting different nodes in different neighborhoods. I think this is really good, and I feel the same way that Matt does about the correct density in this area for downtown to walk. And I also will stand up at town meeting and speak in favorable action on this and explain why as a resident and as a planning board member. So thank you again. And if there's anything I can help with presentation wise, I know you guys have been doing a great job, but it would be great to have another look at it as we move forward. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for the kind words. Kevin or Theo, do either one of you have any questions or concerns?
No questions or concerns for me. I think, thank you, Jim, Aaron, and Matt, for all the work you put into this. I think that really comes through in the map and also the detail you give as you talk about it. I think all of it makes sense. I think you have answers to the questions that people have posed during the public hearings. I'm supportive of this. I have no reservations about it.
That's terrific. I wondered, Jim, if you wouldn't mind giving a 30-second list of the working group, and because I think it does show that the technical expertise and the complete response to the challenge.
Yep. So the working group consisted of Matt, licensed land surveyor, myself, who works in the development construction industry as well. You also include Julie Smith Galvin, who is from the town council, who provides invaluable insight in terms of the town folk and the feedback that we get in the public side. Greg McIntosh, who is a lawyer by trade, so he was able to keep us honest when we were developing the bylaw, you'll see, as well as Robin Greenberg, who's a licensed architect at a local reputable firm. And so she was able to provide great feedback as it relates to some of the design considerations when we were crafting the bylaw, as well as someone who has to go through local zoning codes. I'm sure she was able to avoid us from some pratfalls. And then lastly, Matt Bowen, who's a local citizen who volunteered to serve on the working group, who does not serve in any official capacity with the town in another role. And he was able to provide, I'll call it outsiders perspective. And I think that the group, and then last but not least, Aaron, who is our fearless town staff member, who economic development / zoning / all these other roles, who was able to help guide the process and took over and did a lot of modeling. As Aaron mentioned, we had a consultant at the first half of this. I was able to plug and assist the development model and making sure that some of these numbers that you have to do for this compliance model were met. We lost him halfway through due to his funding running out, and Aaron ably stepped up and was able to actually run the compliance models on the fly for a handful of meetings in order to validate that some of the proposed changes we were going to have either wouldn't work or would work. So I think the group was well balanced and I think brought a lot of careful consideration to the problem.
I agree, and I'm grateful for the expertise and the work and the effort that everyone's put in. I too am 100% in support and behind this. I think all of the logic for why we're centering it around Wakefield in the downtown, Wakefield Station in the downtown really makes a ton of sense. I did reflect, Matt, your comment about a track record of having just done the bare minimum does set us up on the back foot and at disadvantage. And that's why we have a car congestion problem. And this helps us be more proactive and get ahead and do a couple things, right? Provide the opportunity for more property owners to perhaps redevelop and provide different housing choices for different kinds, different households at different stages of life, and to be welcoming to families, because we don't have starter homes or a lot of other opportunities there. I think, the comment about Wakefield, Wakefield is both part of the solution to this larger statewide housing shortage, but Wakefield itself has a housing shortage, and that's really evident in rents and our low vacancy rate and the high housing prices. And so I think that, we're not just being altruistic to help out the rest of the state. We are actually doing something thoughtful and proactive that has immediate and long-term benefits to our own community. The other thing, Matt, about really being proactive, I think having been like the inclusionary zoning requirement that we added, I think really helped help us take leaps and bounds to get closer to our 40B requirements, and sets us up for even longer term thoughtful planning and housing production and preservation. So that's another example, and this just fits in with that logic as well. The sort of my last comment is, when in the public comments, we got a couple questions about housing design and what that means, and the response was, and I'm glad, we have the site plan review, and that really does help, I think, ensure some consistency with town character. But also, I think part of the other comments were really reflective of a need for more rental housing and more affordable housing. And that, I think, speaks to, Matt, your comments, and Jim, your comments about the next step would be thinking about upzoning or consideration of another overlay or some other, strategic planning to think about where more rental housing could be, that makes sense, that again fits with the town character. And that is another way of staying proactive, both in terms of housing choice, but also 40B and just our housing production policy and plan and all of that. So I'm fully on board as well.
Well, that's all great to hear. If Mr. Chair, if it's acceptable to you, I'd like to pivot to the bylaw. I'll go through a couple highlights, and I know I've got a version where we've got some track changes from the town engineer that Aaron's been working with in order to do this. But I've highlighted I don't want to grind through the whole thing. I'm more than happy to go into as much or as little detail as the balance that the planning board wants to go into, but I've highlighted a handful of things that I think are important to highlight as we're talking about potentially referring something to the town council to be included in the warrant. So I'll just go through in terms of this is for everyone who knows, this is based on a template from the state. The working group has gone through and edited multiple times to make it, I'll call it, more Wakefield centric. And then we've gotten feedback from town council Mullen, and then you'll see some comments from the chief engineer, Bill Rennell, that are track changes in this version. So a handful of things. There's a provision here that is thoughtful in terms of we're explicitly, if a lot is not included in the district 100%, then it's not excluded on the basis that some of the zones where we excluded the frontage along North Albion and Maine, we don't want to have someone be able to argue that, because they've got 75% of their lot in the zone, then it still is included. It's being excluded on purpose. If I keep motoring through here, there are a number of elements as it relates to parking. One of the things that I'll defer to Aaron on is Bill Renault had a number of comments related to the parking section that we had put together. So Aaron, you want to walk through some of the comments from Bill that you reviewed?
Yeah, so Bill and Bill met with Steve last week and they just started talking about the bylaw, and Bill's been kind of sitting down with me, and we've met with him a few times, me and Jim, to kind of go through the bylaw, and he took another look at it, and he's ultimately the one that we'll probably be turning to, as well as Benny DiCristoforo, when it comes to the parking, when someone comes into town hall to create one of these new housing developments. So his recommendation is, since we pulled 1, 2 originally and 3 from our current zoning bylaw, he recommended that we allude to the current parking bylaw that we already have in place, which is 19037. I guess, I don't know if you've had a chance to kind of look at it, but again, the language is pretty similar to what you see that's crossed out here. I guess the questions that I forwarded this to the MBTA working group today and told them to read through it and let me know if they had any concerns. But we could just include 19037, which is A through C, which I believe might be the ones that we're looking at right here. I don't have the bylaw pulled up.
They're lifted verbatim.
Okay, yeah, so that was A, B, and C, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the question that really remains is, do we want to include D and E? So D really pertains to having aisles, and that's, I think, something that we talked about in quite great length, about how you would need a certain minimum square footage lot to make this work. But after me and Bill looked at the compliance model, he believes that what they're looking at in the parking removal, and I won't go into the details with the data, that it does seem to be built into the DHCD's compliant model of having aisles if we need them, and removing that space from the lot, if that makes sense. He's just concerned with having tandem parking, and that's something we talked about as the MBTA working group, that some people didn't have concerns about. It could cause some issues, and issues too when we do the site plan review. So something for us to think about. And the last thing is E. We don't have any language about a buffer in the bylaw that we did have for the MBTA communities. When from the property line, as well as from the building for parking. Basically, we're allowing right now parking to the lot line and adjacent to the building. If we could consider a different version that you'll see here, that is different, with different dimensions and required screening, whether that be landscaping and things like that. So I think E, you need like a 7.5 foot buffer. But those are a few things that I would like this group to talk through, and kind of, we include it, we don't include it, we can just add different language, and then that's there's a few more things on parking, but I'll stop there.
And just for the other members of the planning board, when the working group reviewed this, the thought process was that we were going to lift the 19037 A, B, and C, which defines the fact that parking spaces need to be on the lot that it's servicing or get a special permit, defines the size and the construction of the off-street parking spaces. And so that was the intent, with the thought process of explicitly excluding D and E, specifically D, where it talks about the drive aisle widths. And the purpose is that if they were tandem parking spaces, the working group thought that it would be appropriate for the planning board in their capacity as a site plan reviewer to review that on a specific location in lieu of requiring it, that aisle as a general purpose. That was at least the thought process. I'm more than happy to facilitate a conversation amongst the other members of the planning board if people have strong thoughts or opinions.
Yeah, Jim, quick question. Would that mean it would be a special permit when for each lot we would review each indication, or are we looking at adding it to the bylaw and revising? So I just wanted to be clear.
Yeah, so I think the intent would be that the the special permit, so right now, the only special permit that we're specifically talking about would be a special permit to have parking spaces that are not, that service a lot that's not on the lot. And that as part of the site plan review, if there was some sort of inappropriate tandem parking space that the planning board thought wasn't appropriate, that would be covered via the site plan review process. That would be if we excluded D and E. We didn't get into that much in terms of screening as a group.
I think I'm in favor of treating these potentially 2 and 3 family buildings a little bit differently than the standard parking for a bigger building and bigger development. So having an aisle with a required aisle, I think is kind of onerous, and whereas it may limit how much can be built in town. Again, do we really want to start now having a zone where it's basically impossible to build something? And we're getting towards that at this point. Having buffers between buildings and parking and between abutters and parking, I think that needs to be in there. Something, perhaps not 7.5 feet, but something a little bit better than that. So I think we should treat these as the parking on this as more a multi-family house instead of a large apartment building. So I think we need to somehow separate the two.
Kevin or Theo, do either one of you have any thoughts?
Yeah. Kevin?
Sorry.
Do you have any thoughts? Because I have sort of one question.
Yeah, I'm in alignment with what Matt said. I feel like if the purpose of this and doing it is to encourage an increase in the availability of housing, but then we put kind of strict and not fitting regulations for a 4-family unit as currently as we see in D&E, that it sort of defeats what we're sort of working in opposition of what we're trying to do. And it feels like we're putting more priority on the part of the lot that's dedicated to parking than the part that's for housing.
Yeah.
I would just completely agree with that last line you said, that the inclusion of the aisles is focusing more on the parking than on the housing. And I think that that's a backwards way of looking at it. So, I think, thank you for that line.
Would we need to establish some sort of rule or sort of operating guideline that we'd want to follow for site plan review? Or is that, I mean, when any by right comes up, we've got the discretion to just be reasonable and see how they're figuring it out.
I think you need to have some guides, because if someone's going to bring a plan to us, they should know exactly what the parameters are of what they're working towards. If we don't have anything and say, well, bring it to the planning board for site plan review and then we'll review it, what are we basing that on? Basically, it's just our opinion. So I think we need to have some kind of guidelines. I think they need to be, I'm not going to say vague, but they need to be pliable enough where someone can creatively, work in these spaces. Because again, we're going to have some people that may have a car. It may be parked in their driveway all week long, and only a few cars are going back, heading out during the day. So we need to look at how we envision and we hope that a lot of this housing is going to be used. And again, it's for commuters and it's for people that are gonna be doing a lot of their business work and shopping locally or using rideshare or something like that.
And those are guidelines that we don't have to develop today or before putting this into effect. Those
I
are
mean, I think we'd
guidelines.
like some sort of guidance before we go to town council and we go to public hearing. That's what I think, but
Mhm.
we can allude to A and C and then have our own D, basically, trying to think of what the wording would be. I mean, we do highlight that they need to have 1.5 parking spaces per unit. So they need to make that work one way or the other, right? I guess that could also make or break too, based on the square footage of the lot, how many units they're gonna be fitting, based on what the parking may look like. So if that makes sense.
I agree with Aaron. I think that we need to provide direction such that we can get something that even if it gets edited in some, I'll call it minor fashion, we need to have the basic broad strokes nailed down before we refer it to the town council. I think my opinion is that we should have the references to A, B, and C, and then we should potentially think about having language saying that access shall, tandem is allowed by, however many deep we think as a planning board that's appropriate. If people are comfortable with, 3 cars tandem or 4 cars tandem, I'm assuming people aren't going to be okay with 6 cars tandem, but, we probably want to have something to that effect and then get that baked in. And then as we go through the public hearing process, if we edit it slightly, I think that that's appropriate based on feedback we get from different members of the community.
I think this is a good conversation, and I wonder how much of this should we have? Is any of this should we propose to, like, are we going too fast? Should we put together questions that we want town council to review as well, to have them included in this process as far as understanding and making the decision? Or do we want to do all this now and propose them with something very close to finish? I'm just thinking about.
So, Bill, do you
Yeah.
mind if I interject you for a
Yeah,
second?
yeah,
So,
yeah.
the way the process works is that the
Mhm.
planning board is the intent, or the proposal right now is, if the planning board is amenable, is that we would refer the map that we just reviewed as well as this bylaw to the town council
Mhm.
with the intent that the town council statutorily shall refer that back to the planning board for the purposes of reviewing via a pair of public hearings. The conclusion of it, after those public hearings, we as a planning board are entitled to take a vote to refer it to the warrant. So
Okay.
so I think if we have the broad strokes completed and we refer something to the town council and a couple things change, I'll call it on the margins, I think that's acceptable, but you can't change it foundationally between when it gets referred to, like, we couldn't change the map and enlarge it by like 50%.
Oh, no, I was just
until
thinking
we
of the
refer it.
parking stuff that we're discussing right now.
Yeah.
The other stuff I think is really solid, and it sounds like we're all in agreement with that direction. It's really this parking stuff that has been a little difficult, even bringing it up during the public Q&A and everything. It was something we're like, do we want to stay away from this? Do we want because we know it's going to be a contention. I'm a little concerned that the parking is what a lot of people maybe at town meeting will be like, nope, because of the parking, I'm not gonna vote in favor of this. So how do we really want to approach it at the board? Do we want to have everything else ready and then say, hey, town council, here's what we want to do, but we want some feedback on this because we are concerned that this could be an item in here that will throw it in one direction and not have it approved at town meeting. That's my concern.
Can everyone else on the planning board see my my screen? I just
Yes.
pulled up. This is 190-37D. So this is the one that we explicitly excluded, and then this is the landscaping that we were just referring to as well, that Bill mentioned. The aisles, the whole thing with the aisles is that at one of the working group, or actually, sorry, from the planning board public forums, is that these aisles, if we include them, they end up really constraining the sites. So we could end up seeing, I'll call it podium parking, which I don't think is anyone's preferred outcome.
Yeah, and I think we need to come up with something and then present it to town council and let them comment on what we presented, not just say, hey, what do you think of this? And then we'll work on something. I think we just need to come up with something and put it in. And another thing I think we really need to remember is a lot of people in the working world really don't believe that even though we have allowed by right 4 units on all of these, that in reality, it can be 4 units. A lot of these are gonna be probably 3 units. So putting an aisle, having an aisle width for 3 units doesn't make sense even more. So we need to look at this as not just, oh, there's gonna be the maximum amount of cars, which is 6 cars. I think more of these are gonna be potentially 3 units than they're gonna be 4. And that's still complying with the spirit of the law, because just because you have you live in a zone where you potentially could have 4 units, if you don't have the land for it, it's not like it's your right, and therefore, like we've heard, it's like, well, I'm entitled to 4 units. It doesn't work that way. So whatever parking we come up with, it needs to work with potentially 3 or 4 units.
To me, that makes a really good argument for permitting tandem. I mean, if the maximum number of cars is going to be 4, then you go tandem, and you're that's sufficient.
That would be sufficient for some lots,
Yeah.
but not all. So, as we're going through this, we just have to be aware that we shouldn't be planning for 4 units on every single lot.
Right.
Because it's not going to work.
Honestly, that's why I advocate. I think that this is, I mean, in my opinion, I think that if we omit D in its entirety, and if someone comes in and they propose six car spots tandem, then I think that we have a conversation during the site plan review, because I think that that's unreasonable access, which I think is something that we could we could have a conversation with any potential proponent as a body. That's my opinion. And I think that Matt's 100% right. I don't think every one of these is going to be a 4 unit.
How about some language about like parking area? The parking area located within the lot must safely accommodate, like, to me, it's more people exiting and entering safely. From the lot with, say there are 6 cars, and it would be covered under the site plan review, but I think if there's some language, I'm just talking this through, that kind of touches on that point. It kind of leaves it vague, but also kind of highlights that that's what we're looking for, a parking area within the lot, and it must accommodate these 1.5 parking spaces per unit safely for exit and entering. I don't know if that makes sense. I mean, it keeps it vague, but
The words, I think, accommodate and safely enter and exit, I think those are good words. I think, as Matt said, they're vague enough, but they're like, I think they're getting in there where I think we can put a couple sentences together. And I agree that D should come out.
So do other members of the board have an objection with that line of thinking that we can workshop something saying, you know, that language that Aaron referenced and then bake it into this?
I think that makes sense.
I think that makes sense. I would advocate for having some minimum buffers between the building, even if it's a walkway. And then some type of landscape buffer along the property line. And I'd say like 3 or 4 feet of something, at least to put snow when it snows, and to have a door swing. If someone were to park there, they can open their door and not, swing onto someone else's property. So, let's say that you need to have let's pick a number, either 3 or 4 foot buffer between a lot line and maybe a 3 foot buffer between buildings. Does that sound like it would work?
I think that's
yeah.
entirely reasonable. I think if you made it 4 feet for both just for consistency, and then you're done. It's a walkway, very typical walkway size too.
Sorry,
Alright,
Matt,
so-
can you repeat that?
Who's that, for Jim or myself?
Oh, sorry, Matt.
Yeah, to have a 4 foot, as Jim said, 4 foot buffer between buildings and between property lines.
Okay,
So preferably the buffer to the property line will be landscaped. And the buffer along a building can be landscaped or it can be a walk. That basically restricting parking within 4 feet of the building or the lot.
I think basically it's taking this section of 190E and making it so instead of 7.5, it's 4, and then adding from all buildings and lot lines. And that would get you there. Correct me if I'm wrong, Matt. That's essentially what you're advocating for.
Correct, yeah. So say you had 2 of these houses next to each other, there potentially should be an 8 foot strip between the 2 of where parking would be. So I think that will work. And then have some language for reasonable accommodations for traffic movement or something to that effect. And then, so we're laying down the guidelines, and now the creativity of who's designing this can fit their parking in. Maybe have, 2 live spaces where it's for shuffling cars and 2 tandem. Again, I don't think we should really say exactly how they're gonna do it, but that is a potential where if you have one unit that has 2 cars, they've got 2 stack spaces and the others, shuffle back and forth. It's an urban area. That's what's gonna happen if you wanna have a car. That's just the way.
So I put this sentence together. I did parking area. I don't know if this comes before number of parking spaces or after, but the parking area located within the lot must reasonably and safely accommodate the movement of the dwelling units' vehicles.
Do you
That
need
sounds
it?
good.
I think the only thing about it is just entering and exiting the lot. I don't know if I heard that.
Okay, I did have that and then I removed it. The movement accommodate the exiting.
The entering and exiting of vehicles within the into and out of the lot.
Yeah, safely. Something, right?
Yeah, safely, yeah.
Do we want anything about pedestrians or, residents exiting the building? I mean, I guess they're not.
That would be via the 4 foot buffer from the building.
Yeah, okay.
So, Aaron, do you need anything else for these 2 sections, or can I continue to just
No,
motor
you
through the
can
balance?
continue. I have
Okay.
general language that I'll just have to clean up.
Okay. The other thing.
Excuse me, Jim, one more, I think we should do, 4 foot buffer between the building and the side and rear lot line, because you cannot, do we have it do we
I
have a
think it's 10
buffer?
feet. It's 10
Okay.
feet as a buffer as part of our typical dimensional setbacks.
Yeah,
Are we talking parking or are we talking structure?
Talking structure, or when
Okay.
I'm at 10 feet.
Right, okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Were you talking parking, Matt, or were you talking structure?
Now, I was talking parking, so a 4 foot buffer from the building or from the side and rear lot lines. There's no buffer for the front lot line as long as it's not in front of the building, correct? So they could technically park right at the back of sidewalk as long as they're on their lot and not directly in front of the building.
Similar to a tandem.
Okay,
Yeah, because and so there's language in here which I don't know if I have highlighted for the group, but in general, the way the bylaw is written, there's a provision saying that you cannot have parking between the building and the principal right of way. So parking on your front lawn.
I just want to make sure that when we say 4 foot from the lot line, that someone doesn't interpret it, well, now you're telling me the parking space has to be 4 foot from the front lot line. That's why I think we should have it the side and, the 4 foot from the side and rear, and leave the front line open to not have a 4 foot gap.
Makes sense. So I'll start just going through the balance of this and some of the ones I highlighted for the work or for the planning board to review. The number of parking spaces, so it's 1.5. We had talked about going lower based on where we're citing this, but we heard back from traffic advisory that they did not recommend that. So the working group proposed the 1.5. And if anyone has any questions or concerns from the planning board, feel free to raise your hand. I'm more than happy to walk through any more in detail. Moving through here, there's a whole section in terms of the development standards. Some of the ones that I think are relevant are plantings. So the Conservation Commission had a native planting policy that was passed actually within the last couple of weeks. So we were able to just refer to that in terms of plantings encouraged to use the native vegetation, and then to refer to that document that the Concom is maintaining. We ended up adding some language as it relates to outdoor light and a lighting plan being requested to be provided as it relates to the foot candles, and that the exterior lighting shall be limited to a 15-foot high, cast a maximum of 8-foot candles on the ground, and to not have light pollution on the exterior or adjacent lots, as well as kind of, I'll call it dark sky light intent. Stormwater management.
No, I'm just saying that's excellent. Thank you for putting that part in.
Stormwater management, we were able to, again, luckily there was another section within the zoning bylaw that we were able to refer to for the 170 storm drain connection and the stormwater management bylaw and its associated requirements. So motoring through, there's a number of things that relates to corner lots. There were site plan review. So site plan review is required for buildings with 3 or 4 units. 2 units do not require site plan review because they're allowed as of right under the base zoning, not applicable to this overlay. So there's a number of submission requirements. A lot of these are, more or less copy pasted from some of the other site plan or definitive plan requirements. One of the ones that it looks like Bill just added was a stormwater report. So that's a good catch on his part that we probably do want to make sure we get a stormwater report. And then we've got all the other elements as it relates to size and other requirements of the submission. And then there were some languages as it relates to, what we are trying to review as part of the site plan to make sure that it, basically meets the application of the development standards as listed above. And then we end up changing a couple dimension, add as of right, as well as multifamily dwelling. We had to review that, go from 4 to 3 as it's currently reviewed in the bylaw, and then some additional sections where we're adding, entries to the tables that we all have in terms of dimensional requirements and or allowed uses. So more than happy to review any more of this in greater detail. If anyone from the planning board has any other questions or concerns.
Jim, I had one question, 190-116, section 3.
190, 116.
The height section there.
Yes.
So I know this is in the current zoning bylaw. In the current one, I think at the very end there, it's more than 20% of the ground floor area of the building. Did you want to mimic what the current one is, or was there a reason for going up to 25%?
I believe that that was based on the template from the state. So if we have something different in our zoning code, I think that it probably would be appropriate, to your point, to edit that to be consistent,
Okay.
unless other members of the planning board have an objection to that.
I'll be right back.
No, I think it's good to be consistent where possible, so make it 20%.
Okay. And Kevin, good catch. Attorney Bobrovsky / Dan Lieber would be proud.
Another BRC tidbit I picked up. So in 190-119, in sections 3 and 4 there, in 3 it mentions site plan review authority, and then in 4 it mentions planning board. One of the
You
things,
said, I apologize, you said 119 section what?
so sections 3 and 4, in section 3 it mentions site plan review authority, and then in section 4 it lists the planning board. We may want to just be consistent using the same term. What we've been doing on BRC is trying to be specific to the authority, so we may want to just say planning board throughout. There might have been areas earlier in this as well where we kind of rotate back and forth.
Like that?
Yeah. And then also in section 4, there's site plan approval. Approval for use is listed in section B. What does section B refer to?
You're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Section B is, so that refers back to, if you bear with me, up to. You know what?
That might
looks
have
like it.
changed when Tom kind of put the article numbers in.
You're
Or not
right.
articles, yeah.
You're right. That was, so Kevin, good catch again. That was that's like a severed link from a reformat. Oops. So we'll need to highlight that and make sure that we get that. Because I think that's permitted uses. It looks like it's actually section permitted uses is, I apologize for moving the screen so much, but that permitted uses would be this. So it's the 190 or 190, 115.
And then I think there's a similar update in 190, 119, 1.
190, 119, 1.
Yeah, where there's reference to section C through E.
Yeah. That would also be the same thing where that is referring to. So we should just refer that to 190, 118. Aaron, did you get that or did I go too fast?
What was that?
So
Sorry, you guys are doing.
yeah, no, that's my bad. So this section right here, 190, 119, number 1.
190, 119. Yep,
You see where it says section C through E?
yep.
So that section C through E, if you bear with me, I'm going to go back up. It should refer to 119, 118 development standards.
Okay. Got it.
Kevin, do you have any other ones?
Nope, that's all I got.
Okay. Are there any other questions, concerns, comments from the other members of the planning board regarding either the map or the bylaw? In that case, if other members of the board are amenable, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion.
Please.
So I'd like to make a motion for the planning board to refer the the MBTA community multifamily overlay district zoning bylaw as amended based on the comments as discussed as part of this discussion, as well as the map reviewed earlier in this meeting, to the town council for the purposes of potential inclusion in the warrant for the spring town meeting.
And I'll second that.
Any other comments, questions? All right. Other planning board members? Bill?
Yes, in favor.
All right. Jim? Kevin?
Yes.
All right. Matt?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Terrific. That's fantastic. All right.
If you would, Mr. Chair, before we move off this topic. Thank you, all the members of the planning board and everyone else that's been involved in this process, especially Aaron. You guys have all been a pleasure to work with, and obviously we're not done yet, but I think that this was a really thoughtful process and a thoughtful conversation that we had even as recently as today. And I'm confident that between now and when we get to town meeting, that we'll continue to have do the process right. So thank you everyone for helping and for pitching into this process.
And thank you, Jim, mostly. You did the bulk of this along with Aaron. I know it's not easy to write something and then have everyone pick it apart constantly, but that's part of the job, unfortunately. But that's how things get refined. So good work. You put a lot of work into this. I think this is something that, going forward, we're making the best of the situation that's being handed to us. And I think we're doing it in a thoughtful way. So thank you.
Can I just ask one question? Clarify. I was going through making these edits and I kind of got pulled around different. Kevin, when you said section B, permitted uses, that was referring to number 4, right? In 119, you said, correct?
Yeah, number 4.
And then alluding to 190, okay, I think I got it.
115, right?
115, yeah, okay, got it.
Matt, you said it perfectly. Thank you. As an epilogue, do we need to talk about sort of calendar for when these public meetings are going to occur and our deadline for sending it back to town council for the warrant,
Sure.
So my understanding is that that motion will be referred to the town council for the January 22nd town council meeting.
right.
Town council shall refer it back to the planning board, which triggers the ability to have a public meeting, formal public meeting. And I think, Aaron, you've laid out the schedule in terms of when we could potentially have those.
Yeah, so public hearing, just
Right,
I want to
hearing.
clarify that
Right.
too. I don't want words to come back to haunt us. So what I currently have is, so we'll go to the town council meeting. If you want me to share my folder or what I'm looking at here, I can. If I have.
Yeah.
Can you guys see this? I'm just moving some things around. So you'll see here, so you kind of see some old dates as well, but, and then have, so we're right here, sending planning board, the draft and bylaw. I put together a presentation and putting together a presentation for town council. And I think that's a question we need to talk about too tonight, who will be presenting, from the planning board for the January, 22nd meeting. We will go to the town council with this information we all talked about tonight. Then we actually are going to discuss this at our January 23rd, 2024 meeting to set the public hearings. We can put this on the agenda, from my understanding, prior to it officially being referred from the town council on the 22nd. From there, I'll be able to do the legal public hearing notice. And I guess that's a question for this group too. I know in the past we've done 2 public hearings, or we continue the public hearings. But for right now, I have 2 public hearings in January, and then a meeting with, I'm sorry. So the 2 public hearings I have are February 13th as well as February 27th. And then in between those 2 meetings, I hope to have a bylaw review committee meeting, I think the week of February 19th. And then from there, it would have to go to the warrant, which I assume will be closed a month or a little before a month of town meeting, which that date has officially not been set, but judged by the charter, it would be at probably the end of April. So that's kind of the schedule we're looking at right now.
Going, if you can share,
Oh.
keep sharing your screen again. So the deadline to send it back to, the deadline for us to sponsor the article is March 18th, which would mean,
That's, I should have a tentative next to
yeah,
that, but I
yeah,
assume that's probably, we'd want it at least a month before,
yeah,
close the warrant and all that too.
right, because the bylaw says 60 calendar days
Mhm.
from the date of the meeting. So that would mean our March 12th meeting, or we'd have to have a separate meeting between the 12th and the 18th.
Yeah, I mean, we could have a special meeting if we needed to. But yeah, from what I've seen in past meetings, but again, I can get more definite answers once the meeting is set, of when that warrant, but I think the schedule we have now, I've talked it over with Steve, would put us in good shape.
Mhm. Okay. That that's very workable for me, and that's great. And that's we are going to be doing a lot, and y'all have already done a lot. So I will just say thank you in advance. The Kevin, it would be Monday, February 19th that we would meet with the bylaw review committee, right?
I heard from Dan, sorry, Kevin, I mean to cut you off. I did hear from Dan that they were planning on skipping that week due to the holiday being the 19th. So we may have to do some sort of other type of meeting. He said he would bring it up to the group. So I don't know if that was discussed
Oh,
yet.
okay.
He emailed and mentioned February 5th to us, so it might be possible to get it into that meeting.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, all right.
And I just want to note that, once we refer this to town meeting, to town council, it's just a formality for us to have a public hearing, because the public hearing would be whether we favorably respond, we're favorable to this or we're not. We can't make changes to it. So we're just getting comment on what's been presented. That's going to go to town meeting. Same with going to the bylaw review committee. If we go to the bylaw review committee and they have wholesale changes, either we have to pull it like we've done before, or it goes forward. So, I mean, we can go to the bylaw review committee. They're not going to be able to practically do much at this point. So is that something that you still want to do? Is that, do we need to have that pathway?
I mean, we've had conversations with Dan, right, Jim, back in late fall. And kind of threw some ideas. And he gave us feedback. Um,
I mean, not to throw water on this, but
No, I
we're
think-
back into this, we're back into the same issue we had with the bylaw review committee not reviewing something in time for us to then put it to town council to put it on the warrant. And then once they did do it, they had a lot of issues with it and it had to be pulled. So I just want to make sure that, unfortunately, the bylaw review committee should have looked at this a lot sooner and been commenting on this. And unfortunately, they really haven't got to it. So I just want to set our expectations that if it does go there and they rip it apart, the only option would be to not go, to pull it for Springtown meeting and go for the fall town meeting, which I think would be disastrous.
yeah. I would not recommend that. You know, we have had Tom Mullen help us draft this. I trust Tom Mullen, and his guidance with this. Jim, I don't know if you have anything to add. From my understanding, there could be small tweaks, but you're saying like wholesale changes, like rip this apart, then we'd have to pull it. I would hope that would not happen. And Kevin, based on what you've been seeing, do you think this is in line with, you know, some of the changes that you guys have been making?
So I was actually going to ask if Attorney Mullen had reviewed it as well. So to hear that he has, I think that's good and promising. The only thing that complicates it is what I don't want to happen is for BRC to try to combine this with the overall zoning bylaw
Mm-mm.
being reviewed right now because the timelines are so different for them. So, I mean, what could work is to just take this at the spring to the spring town meeting so that we can get it passed or get it presented in case it fails and we have time to rework it before the fall one. And then let BRC worry about how it aligns with the overall zoning bylaw change later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's been part of the discussion, knowing that we are not on the timeline for the zoning change, the overall zoning language changes. And so we kind of just push forward on our own. And honestly, we really haven't been able to wrap this up until as of recent. And so I guess our hands are kind of tied when it comes to the time we were working with as well. You know, I could send this over. You know, Tom has reviewed it. I'm comfortable with what we have. Jim, Matt, I don't know what you have to say. Again, if things have to change, I mean, we are following, you know, some parameters here that were set for us of what we need to follow when it comes to the state guidelines. So, there's that. And I do remember, I was talking to Bobrowski about this at the beginning of when this all started with the bylaw review, and him, if I recall, saying that this should kind of live on its own. I don't know if someone else remembers that as well. But we could maybe make necessary language changes down the road.
Yeah, I think that the living on its own is something that we had talked about with Chairperson Lieber previously. And I think that it would make a lot of sense to have this passed on the merits as it is right now, especially given the fact that Tom Mullen did a full rewrite of it. And it looks like Kevin did a pretty thorough review. I wouldn't necessarily advocate for having the bylaw review committee review it and then not being able to incorporate any of their comments when they're going through a whole bylaw recodification process already. I feel like you guys have enough on your plate, and if you wanted to review this and make amendments as part of the bylaw recodification, that would be the avenue I would recommend.
I would sorry, go ahead.
Makes the most sense.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I would like to follow exactly what Kevin presented. And to the point of Tom Mullen reviewing and rewriting, he also reviewed and rewrote and had a big part of the street naming, which is what Matt was referring to that was pulled. So I don't have confidence that if we do have it reviewed by the bylaw review committee that it will be in time. So I agree. Yeah, if we don't, if we don't have this at town meeting in the spring, it's going to be a stressful fall. So let's do what we can to get
I
it
think-
through.
I think what the way we can is more of a formality,
Mhm.
you know, and they are able to see it. And if we want to meet with them, great, let them know that this is what we just need for them. Just want them to see it. Appropriate changes, wholesale changes that need to be done. We are not, you know, we are on a timeline here. We can revisit them, you know, if it passes down the line.
Yeah, and one of the other things we could do is bring it to them and say, we're sharing this with you. At this point, we cannot accept the way the process is and the timeline, we really can't accept large changes. But we do hope that you support us at town meeting and get up and say that. And help, you know, if someone, you know, pushes, has a bylaw review committee looked at this, we want to know that you did look at it and either you're favorable with it or not too. But this is something that this pathway we need to keep going down. We can't deviate too much and have, you know, we need to make these changes or we're not going to support it. That we cannot have. So, just for the process.
So we could, to that effect, we could have this cursory discussion with the bylaw review committee on the at their January 29th meeting. You know, we can, or is that too soon? Like, I mean, should we be asking Dan to have a bylaw review committee meeting on February 5th, and just present it to them, you know, for exactly the way Matt said?
I don't think there's any great rush that they need to change their schedule. If they can fit us in, you know, in a scheduled meeting between now and town meeting,
Mhm.
I think that would work.
Yep.
Again, it's at this point, it's just a formality. Here is what what the planning board is putting forward. We hope to support it. And go from there.
Sounds good. Very helpful. Okay, that's terrific. Any other final sort of pre-planning? Oh, Jim, you wanted to talk about who presents to town council on the 21st, 22nd.
Yeah. So I wanted to connect with this group. You know, obviously I've been leading the charge on the working group side of the house. I wanted to afford the opportunity, Theo, as the chair of the planning board of the body that just voted to this, if you wanted to be part of and or part of the conversation or the presentation of the planning board, or if you would prefer to defer it to myself. I'm open to whatever you would like to do.
I think there's a really good strength in numbers. So I would very much like to sort of do some of the intro, and maybe, you know, be able to respond to the process, the public comments we got, and the general nature of those, and then turn it over to you. I think, you know, for exactly the way you presented it to us tonight, and certainly think. So, you know, maybe I would take some of your preface, and be able to make that, and then also say, you know, directly, we voted, you know, 5-0 tonight to approve. And I don't know, Matt, you know, is this a conversation?
I know
you
that I know that the town council will be referring it, but I think there's always strength in being more people being able to say that the body they represent voted unanimously in support of something is always a benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and having a consistent message and consistent answer of questions, I think is good. And Jim is the person for that. I would only, you know, throw some issues around there, but gonna keep me out of it. Let's put it that way. So,
Yeah.
Jim, you keep going forward with it. So,
Excellent.
Okay. In that case, Aaron and Theo, maybe we circle up between now and that meeting to figure out how we want to allocate that. I'm sure that that there'll be plenty of questions from the town council when we get to the meeting.
Agreed. Yeah. Excellent. Fantastic. Yeah. Again, Matt said it all. And yeah, this is a great lift and a great step forward for Wakefield. Our fifth item on the agenda is giving an update on the subdivision rules and regulations. I think if y'all don't mind, we can come back to it on the 23rd, and we did leave our last meeting with Bill Renault with a number of sort of follow-up items like paper streets and things like that and a couple examples to refer to. So I think between that and maybe bringing him to a future meeting to try to put the final edits on this. I think we could get there and get this approved by the end of March at the latest. All right. Sixth item is our master plan update.
Yeah, so I don't really have an update.
Yeah.
I did notify I have been in touch with our consultant as well as the working group, or advisory group, I should call them, letting them know kind of where we are in the process, help that they could provide me moving forward to get this to the finish line. I think that's still a ways away. I'm hoping for the spring. I think I mentioned that last time. Hopefully we'll have more staffing capacity that can help me get it to the finish line. But for right now, I started going through, picking up, I guess I should say, from where I left off and going through the goals and things like that. Everything, remains true. We wrap this up in the fall. And so, I'm not worried about any data or anything being outdated. But we just want to make sure that it's a document that is actually used. And so I would rather take the time and make sure it's something that is of great quality. So, I will keep moving forward. And if I have any more updates for you guys, I will make sure I provide them to you.
Is there any role to do some voluntelling of the Wakefield, the advisory group, to ask for any editing help, or you want to do some
Yeah.
circle back to that group?
Well, I think I did that. I did ask them to pull apart like goals and recommendations that they see if it stays true to the data, as well as some editing. I know I've been working with Jen on that part, the editing. So it's really just making sure that the data that they're seeing aligns with some of the goals and recommendations, and how do we make those more clear cut in an executive summary. I know that's what we discussed at our previous advisory group meeting.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I find the executive summary that we're going to end up having will be much more, a day-to-day tool. And then all the other information will be kind of like an appendix where we kind of go back and look and see where it came from with more historical data and things like that. So.
Yeah. Okay. Really terrific. All right. Item 8, future agenda items. I think we've talked about a lot, and I think we've got a general sense. Are there other things to put on the radar, or other things to talk about on the 21st or 23rd? Okie dokie. All right. And our last item on the agenda are items not anticipated.
We have to go back, sorry, we have to go
Sure.
back to the planning board budget.
Oh my
Number
gosh, yeah. Look at that. I totally skipped right over it. Thank you very much. Budget, please, Aaron. I've got it open if you want me to share.
Sure. So, here you'll see the budget for fiscal year, well, past fiscal years as well as the upcoming fiscal year, which is fiscal year 2025. I sent this around to the group, about 3 weeks ago, I think at this point. I apologize that this did not, we weren't able to meet on this prior to, him going in front of the town council last night. I don't find that there to be many changes to the budget. We discussed, some subscriptions. I think the one, that everyone knows is personnel, for our clerk here. But also, I did have him keep some things the same, as we will be having a planner that will be starting. And, would be, and I've been pulling some of our budget for materials and supplies, just small amounts. But what you really see here is it's a very small budget, compared to the overall town budget. A lot of the postings that we do, as well as mailings, that is all covered by the applicant. And so we don't have to pull those budgets or pull that money from our budget. I didn't know if you wanted me to go line by line, or had any questions about anything. Yeah, that's kind of where we're at. I do fall under Steve in his office. So it doesn't, some of the stuff I use to, gets pulled from his budget, but any planning board stuff is pulled from here. And so, yeah, that's what we have right here. I don't know if anyone had any questions.
I do not. It's totally reasonable. We do need to a motion and to take a vote to approve this.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the fiscal year 2025 planning board budget as reviewed.
No, second that.
All in favor? Kevin,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Susan. All right. So now, onto our last item, items not anticipated. Are there other items to discuss at this time? Yeah, Jim.
This is more of a question for Aaron. I know that the town has in the process of reposting it for a position for the town planner. Can you provide an update as it relates to what the latest goings on with that effort is?
Yeah, I'm not sure how much, details I can get into with that. I do think news will be coming shortly of someone having an official senior planner for the town. I'm just not aware of if it's been made public yet, so I can't share too much information unless I missed it somewhere. But I think you'll maybe we'll see something in the future.
Okay.
We have
I
had,
think I got what you're saying. Thank you.
we've had interviews and things like that, so the process has been moving forward. I guess that's what I'll say.
That's terrific.
So I think whoever this person ends up being will be working really closely together, whether I'm handing off projects or what that looks like, but it's been a huge learning experience for me, and I've learned so much. I did go to school for urban planning, but I've learned a lot here in town, and hopefully I've been beneficial to this group, but hopefully this next person can be a huge asset to you guys.
I think, and I don't want to speak for the behalf board, but I think you've done an excellent job. I do think that if we start some of the planning processes that we've been talking about on like a town-wide level, I think that just a bandwidth perspective, if we had just you, if it was just the only job you were doing, you probably could do it. But if you're doing that plus like 4 other things, I think it'd be a real challenge.
Yeah.
We can all give a round of applause and gratitude, Aaron. So thank you. Any other items? I am attending the next meeting of the open space recreation plan on the 18th, and so I think that's pretty close to being final as well.
I have one thing, Theo. I am up for election this year, so I will be pulling papers. So when that's all open, so I just wanted to let you all know. Looks like I'm on the ballot for 5 more years. We'll see. We'll see how that goes.
Glad to hear it. So thank you in advance. Okay. This has been a really productive and momentous meeting. Without any other items to discuss, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, thank you.
A second.
All right. All in favor? Kevin?
Yes.
Great. Matt?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
And Jim?
Yes.
And myself, yes. So again, can't thank everybody enough, and really look forward to the work we have ahead of us. So